Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, ready to unpack these mortgage rate mysteries.
Absolutely. Let's dive in. There's a lot to untangle.
You got that right. So we're hearing whispers, right? Whispers that the Fed might just hit the brakes on these interest rate hikes. And if that happens, conventional wisdom says mortgage rates should, in theory, start to inch down.
Yeah, that's the usual dance.
And you knew there'd be a but, didn't you?
Always.
There are a couple of party crashers threatening to mess up our rate drop fund. Inflation, of course, and this whole government spending thing.
It's never a dull moment, is it?
Never. But that's what we're here to break down, right? Our main source today is this article from the Capital Gazette, lays it all out there, the good, the bad, the potentially ugly.
That's like a wild ride.
Oh, it is. But let's start with some good news to get us going. Mortgage rates, they've actually been on a downward slide for 6 weeks straight. Right now, we're looking at about 6.29%.
Okay, yeah, that's a move in the right direction for sure.
Right. I mean, that's got to put a little pep in the step of those potential home buyers out there.
It's definitely a glimmer of hope for sure. And this is where understanding the Fed's role is so key. Basically, when they lower their rates, banks often feel a little more generous too, and those lower borrowing costs, they have a domino effect and eventually trickle down to things like, you guessed it, mortgages.
Music to everyone's ears.
Yeah.
But we can't get ahead of ourselves, right? Nothing in life, and especially this market, is ever a straight shot.
Oh, absolutely not.
And Sheila Bair, she ran the FDIC back in the day. She's basically telling everyone to cool their jets before they start celebrating.
Right. Bear makes a good point. It's tempting to get caught up in the excitement of inflation seemingly cooling off, but, and this is a big but, we might be doing a victory dance a little prematurely. See, there's this thing called core inflation. It's basically a measure of inflation, but it strips out volatile prices like food and energy. And that core inflation, it's being a bit stubborn, which has Bear concern.
Okay, so even if these mortgage rates continue to drop, are we essentially just playing a game of catch-up if core inflation doesn't get the memo?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Bear's worry is that lower mortgage rates might actually end up hurting affordability if those underlying factors, those things driving prices up, don't start to behave themselves.
So it's almost like a double-edged sword, potentially lower rates on one side, but this looming threat of core inflation on the other.
It's a delicate dance, for sure.
Okay, that's a lot to process. But hold on, folks, because it gets even more complex. We've got these potential rate drops on one hand, inflation worries on the other, and then Professor Rebel Cole from Florida Atlantic University. He throws another wrench into the works and brings up government spending.
Ah, yes, government spending. We can't forget about that.
So walk us through that. How does government spending play into this whole puzzle?
Well, imagine this. The government goes on a bit of a borrowing spree. That borrowing, if it's not kept in check, can actually make inflation even worse.
Oh, so it's like adding fuel to the fire that the Fed is trying to put out by lowering rates.
Precisely. It creates this whole other layer of uncertainty because even if the Fed cuts rates like we're hoping, excessive government debt, it can sneak in and undermine those positive effects.
It's like trying to run a marathon with a backpack full of rocks.
Exactly. It's a heavy load to carry.
So we've got potential rate drops, we've got inflation concerns, and now we've got government spending to factor in. How is anyone supposed to make sense of this?
Yeah, it really is a lot to wrap your head around, isn't it? So you know what helps me when things get this complicated? Zoom in, Instead of trying to make sense of the whole country at once, let's zero in on a specific place and see how these big national trends are actually playing out on the ground. And since you're here in Florida, let's dive into what our Capital Gazette article has to say about the Sunshine State.
Okay, so Florida beaches, theme parks, and maybe a little housing market drama thrown in for good measure.
No, you're not wrong. Florida right now is like this fascinating case study because it's got all these national forces at play, inflation worries, potential rate drops. But then you layer on top of that all the unique things about Florida.
Right. Like what? Give me the rundown.
Okay, so first, the good news. Florida's job market. Super strong. That's a big plus for anyone looking to buy.
Okay, good.
The catch, affordability. That's the other side of the coin. Actually finding a place in Florida that fits your budget, that's becoming a real struggle in a lot of areas.
I can imagine more people saving on land. Got to put some pressure on things, right?
Exactly. And it's not just people moving here for the sunshine anymore.
Oh, yeah. What else is going on?
Businesses. You've got companies packing up shop and heading to Florida like it's the hottest new restaurant in town. And all those new jobs, they just fuel the demand for housing even more. So even if rates do drop, it might not be enough to completely offset that price pressure in a hot market like Florida.
Okay, so let me see if I've got this straight. You're saying that even if we do see those rate drops everyone's hoping for, whether or not that actually helps buyers depends a lot on where they're looking to buy, like what their local market looks like.
You got it. What's happening at the national level is only part of the story. You absolutely have to look at what's happening right there in your own backyard.
Makes sense. Okay, so speaking of getting a well-rounded view, this Capital Gazette article we're talking about, they actually talked to a bunch of different experts, economists, real estate agents, you name it, to get their predictions about, well, about what the heck is going to happen next.
It's actually a fascinating mix of viewpoints. Goes to show you how complicated this all really is. So one guy they talked to, Mike Pappas, he's with the Keys Company. He's seeing some encouraging signs. He says that there are more homes for sale right now than there were a few months ago, and prices, while still high, seem to be kind of leveling off.
So not this crazy free fall, but also not a rocket ship to outer space either.
Exactly. More of a plateau for now.
That's
But, and this is a big but, Pappas also says, don't expect those pre-COVID prices to magically reappear anytime soon.
Yeah, those days might be gone for good.
That seems to be the consensus, yeah. Okay, so another expert they talked to, Ken Johnson, he's a real estate economist. He had this interesting prediction about rates. He thinks we might be in for a bit of a roller coaster ride.
Like up, down, sideways, who knows?
Right. He calls it a sawtooth pattern. Rates might drop, people get excited and start buying, which pushes prices up. Then inflation worries come creeping back. Maybe the Fed raises rates a bit, and so on and so forth.
Sounds exhausting.
Tell me about it. And then there was Diane Mastey. She's the head honcho over at Tropical Financial Credit Union. She shared a really interesting observation. She's noticed a lot more buyer interest lately, especially from people who've been sitting on the sidelines waiting for a moment like this.
So maybe all this talk about rate cuts, even if they haven't actually happened yet, it's enough to get some buyers off the fence.
Could be. But here's the thing. We've got all these experts, all these different perspectives, but at the end of the day, no one has a crystal ball, right?
So we've thrown a lot of information at you today, haven't we? Rate cuts on the horizon, maybe, but then inflation is being stubborn, and on top of that, government spending might be working against the whole thing. And the experts, well, let's just say they don't exactly agree on what's going to happen next.
It's a lot to digest. It's easy to get caught up in the headlines and the predictions. But, at the end of the day, the most important thing is, what does all of this mean for you right here, right now, as you're trying to navigate this crazy housing market?
Exactly. So how can someone listening cut through all the noise and figure out, okay, what does this actually mean for me, for my family?
Yeah.
What should we do?
Honestly, I think the first step is to just take a breath. Zoom out for a second. And remember, this isn't just about interest rates, right? This is about your life, your financial goals, your dreams. Don't let yourself get so fixated on that mortgage rate that you lose sight of the bigger picture.
So don't just focus on that one number, that interest rate. Think about your whole financial picture.
Right. Your budget, your savings, your long-term plans. What can you realistically afford? What kind of monthly payment will let you sleep at night? Those are the questions you need to be asking yourself.
That makes a lot of sense.
And here's something else to think about, and this is a big one. When people think mortgages, they usually jump straight to that 30-year fixed rate, right? And yeah, those rates have been inching down a bit. But don't be afraid to explore other options.
You mean like what?
Adjustable rate mortgages, government-backed loans, depending on your situation, your risk tolerance, how long you plan to stay in your home. One of those options might actually be a better fit for you in the long run.
That is such a good point. Don't limit yourself, right? Shop around.
Exactly. This is a big decision, and knowledge is power, especially in a market that's constantly changing like this one.
Yeah.
The more informed you are, the better equipped you'll be to make a smart, confident decision.
So much good advice there. I feel like if we had to boil down everything we talked about today, it all comes back to stay curious, stay informed, and don't be afraid to think outside the box a little.
Perfectly said. Don't be afraid to chart your own course. Make the choices that feel right for you, for your unique circumstances, and your own personal goals.
You heard it here, folks. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Stay informed, stay savvy, and happy house hunting, everyone.